Okay, so it says the stream is live, and according to the graph, the microphone's working. Just wait for a bit, see if anybody shows up. First couple of minutes. I wanted to get in and get a last broadcast in before the mid-20s weather comes in for the next 4 or 5 days. In the part of the country I live in, a lot of times that can mean a power outage. If there's a power outage, you can't get on the internet. You certainly can't upload a video. So I just thought I'd get a live stream in this afternoon before the really cold weather comes in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I kind of thought I'd give a little backstory here is how things started off for me as far as mainly what my channel is about. Well, hello, Tignium from Western Canada. You were on yesterday. Good to see you again. I noticed Steve put up another video yesterday late. Steve Isdahl. I'm not sure where he is. He goes to somewhere where it's warm this time of year for a couple of weeks. What I was, we were from Missouri originally. Well, I was born in Missouri, and my dad was a mechanic, and he had this stock car. He did stock car racing when I was about 5 years old, and we weren't really church people at all. We had well, my dad, he was a family man. He was a good man, and we hadn't really been church people at all. And this preacher moved in across the street from us one day. It was kind of comical in a way when I think back on it. Today, when people move into a neighborhood, it seems like everybody's connected on their cell phones and everything. People kind of just, this is just my opinion. It doesn't seem like they get excited about anybody moving in the neighborhood so much. Uh, Used to that people would introduce themselves and get to know each other, but and back when I was a child, that's how it was. This guy came over and introduced himself while my dad was working on his race car. He had a seemed like he had a cutting torch going or something, and he was working on this. He called it the bucket of bolts. That's what it said on the side of it. Um, I've got a picture of that old thing somewhere. But this preacher came over and introduced himself to my dad, and of course, my dad, he was a friendly man, and he was friendly with the guy, and they became friends. But this guy invited him to go to church with him, and it's funny to me because this guy, I never really thought about this. Apparently, I don't know if he was already in the area and he would just move into a different uh, neighborhood or what, but there was this church that he was involved in, and he invited my dad to go with him, and it was a Pentecostal church, and the only church I don't know if my dad had ever went to church. He might have went to mass or something when he was real little, but they had him in a school, and it was, yeah. I hate to even mention names of churches, really, but everybody would know he was in a school of this huge organization that they had their own schooling, and my dad said they kicked him out of there because he asked too many questions. And my dad is well, he's gone now, but he was a real intelligent man and inventive, very inventive. We had on my dad's side, my grandmother was full blooded German, and anyway, um, losing my train of thought already. this guy invited him to church. So he did. He went with him and he took me. And honestly, I don't remember going to that church. Not back in the very beginning. I was just really young, but um, my dad kept going to that church with him, and I don't know. I guess it kind of fit him because he kept going. But what had happened? They had, I guess they had told their Bible stories and whatnot in that Catholic school. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It was a Catholic school, and well, my dad had all kinds of questions. I mean, who wouldn't though? I mean, you're talking about Bible stories. There's going to always be questions. I mean, I even thought of something today when I was reading this morning, uh, about Joseph, like Mary's husband. And I got to thinking, man, Joseph, I've heard that name before. What? You go way back in the Old Testament, there's a guy named Joseph. And of course, everybody knows the guy with the coat of many colors. But a kid, would say, oh, it's the guy with the coat of many colors. You're trying to explain to them. And I guess really when kids ask questions, sometimes adults don't have a whole lot of patience with them, but they got annoyed at my dad. And he said, the truth is, he said, I think that they thought that I was being a smart aleck. He said, but the truth is, he said, I was just curious. And because of his curiosity, well, it got him kicked out. And so, but anyway, that was kind of what he remembers about church. And so we didn't go to church. But when this guy moved in and invited him, well, we did start going. And anyway, it wasn't long, and they had him, down there praying, and he said, they were really friendly people. They tried to make him feel good and patted him on the back and told him you're a Christian and all this stuff. And he said, nothing had changed at all. He said, I could tell that. He said, but I just went along with them. And he said, but deep down, I knew nothing had happened. And so um, finally, one day something happened. He said, it's hard to describe, but he got down there and prayed, and he just he said from that point on things were different. And I've tried to describe it. Of course, coming from my background, I ended up getting to be raised in church because my dad ended up being the pastor. But it wasn't long, and my dad started feeling the call to be a minister. And of course, he still had a full-time job as a mechanic. So uh, to me, that's just an awful lot to do. But that's what he did my whole life. He was always going somewhere and preaching. But that's kind of the background as far as me. I'd had an accident, early on when my dad had first started getting into a church and having a spiritual things going on in his life. And all of a sudden there was this tragic thing where that, you know, it was his son, that was at best was going to be in a vegetable state or die. And of course, uh, these people from that church, they had a connection with God and they prayed, and it came through for me. And so that changed me because it gave me something that, here 65 years later, I still have a really good remembrance of it. And it's, it's just given me an easy, it's easy for me to believe as a result of, because what I saw in that, um, it was just, it's remarkable. Now, back at the time, I didn't realize the sincerity of it. I mean, the severity of it. Um, I was too young, and my parents, they were the ones that were taking care of me. You grew up in a Catholic family until you became a Christian over 10 years ago. Okay, so yeah, you know a little what I'm talking about. I don't like to talk bad about anybody because honestly, I don't like to make blanket statements either. I have a dear friend that's a Catholic, and I got to be honest with you. Here I am, a Pentecostal, and man, I will pray in public at the drop of a hat, and I'm not ashamed in the very least. There's just no shame to me to go out and pray in public. But I don't go out in public and pray over my food. Now, I think that's a great thing. But this Catholic friend of mine, I noticed when he and his wife when I see them in public, or they invited me to go eat with them, they always pray over their food. And I thought, man, that's if nothing else, it's a marvelous testimony. So there's things that they do that I think are wonderful. But anyway, I have a really good friend that they're Catholic, and they're just precious people. And I think that probably it's just like Catholics, probably any other, it's probably like any other church. You have different things happening with different groups. And so I don't like to, yeah, you pray over your food too. That's good. I think that's probably a safe thing to do anyway, especially these days and all the things going around. And honestly, yeah, I just sometimes I feel ashamed because I don't. Yeah, I'm not ashamed to pray in public. Um, so the thing that my dad, I think it really set a kind of a negative mark with him with that organization is because they kicked him out. And and maybe they really did think he was being smart aleck. I mean, you couldn't blame him. You couldn't blame him for that. Um, because who would tolerate such if there's a young buck that's out there trying to make a show of you in front of all the rest of the students. Anyway, he gets kicked out of Christian school. So that's about that's about the story that I got about the Catholic churches. They kicked my dad out, so we didn't go to church. But then this Christian, I think he was a lay minister, which you probably know what that means. He fills in for other preachers when they go on out of town or whatnot. And in my dad's later life, he became a lay minister. He was an actual pastor though for quite a few years, and uh, that happened. When I was probably about 6 years old, he took his first church, which was in another town. We started out in Missouri. Well, I was born in St. Louis, but they got me out of the big city and we moved to a place called Sikeston, Missouri. Being in Canada, you probably wouldn't be familiar with where that is, but that's kind of east of Texas. I'm in Texas now, and Apostle Paul's life. It was house. Yeah, absolutely. I think house churches, actually, that's a great thing. Anyway, yeah, and we've done some of that too. Is a lot of when I was involved in church really strong when I was younger. We did sometimes Wednesdays. We would meet at someone else's house, and you get some really good close between each other. I don't know. There's something it's you don't get with the big group. Yeah, but but anyway, my dad. We moved from Sikeston after he got the call on his life. He actually became a pastor, and we moved to a place called Malden, Missouri, which it doesn't seem like it was that far away from the Sikeston where we had where my dad actually got saved and started living for the Lord. And it's funny because a lot of people when they commit their lives to Christ, you'll see a huge change. I didn't really, of course, I was very young. I was 5 years old, and my dad just he didn't go off on a rampage and cuss and throw fits. He didn't cuss or smoke or drink or he didn't. I never saw my dad do any of that stuff. And so a lot of people, they give up a lot of habits. The one thing he did give up though, he really felt like that it wasn't conducive, I guess, to his life anymore, was driving that race car. Actually, uh, one thing that happened, I think it threw up a red flag to him, is it was on an oval track. It was a dirt oval track, and it went uphill on both ends. And so one night he went off a tie rod broke on the race car, and he went over the edge up at the highest point, and we saw the car bounce. It bounced and it came upside down. All four wheels were up in the air, and then it ended up bouncing. The second time it landed on the wheels, and Dad got cut, but he wasn't hurt seriously. He was just bleeding, and so um, I think he took that as a sign that maybe, he was fortunate he hadn't really gotten hurt and maybe it's time to get out of it. So he gave up the race car, but he did become a minister and started pastoring a church. And as a result of that, we moved around to different places in the country. And he pastored for, I'm going to say approximately 8. I didn't realize this at the time, but looking back later, like now, I was just thinking the other day, he usually pastored about 18 months. It seemed like everywhere we went, it was about a year and a half. And I was noticing in reading in the New Testament the other day that it seemed like, just like with Paul, I can't remember if it was Paul or if it was one of the other. I think it was Paul, though. Pretty much that was how things went, even in the New Testament, that about 18 months that, would be a common time for them to spend at a place teaching. But um, yeah, I did the video about the Apostle Paul's life the other day. I really think it really is something that I identify with. A good model to follow would be Priscilla and Aquila for gatherings. Yeah, I remember them. Their names. I can't remember the specifics on on their gatherings. I have read the New Testament multiples and multiples of times. I don't know how many times, and I'm still gaining things out of it. I mean, I'm underlining things. It seems to help a lot, underlining things in the scriptures for two reasons. It helps me to retain in my memory as I'm reading to start with, and when I go back to find yeah, you found it too. Yeah, yeah, that's it's been a big help to me. And yeah, Dad moved us. We went out to Arizona for a time. He made really good money while we were out there, and he was in a front end and brake business, which was an established business in Kingman, Arizona. And us kids, we were happy out there because Dad had money and we could do things. We get bicycles and things, and we wanted to go back there. I figured I'd get a mini bike if we went back to Arizona. But we had moved from Arizona. We'd ended up in Palestine, which is my dad opened up a church that had been closed for some time there. And he got the Palestine church going really well. And we moved to a place called Powderly, Texas for about a year and a half. It's close to Paris, Texas. And it's funny, many, many, many years later, as I got my pilot's license, I had to do a couple of I had to do one long cross country. It took me back over there to Paris, Texas. I'm trying to remember if I even landed. I believe I did land at that airport. I went to Shreveport Regional and landed, and then I went to Paris. And we had been there as a child. I was about 8 years old. My dad actually bought me a horse while we lived in Powderly, Texas, near Paris. And all those years later, I hadn't really been there. I think as traveling, I had passed through that area, but I hadn't stopped or revisited it at all. But as one of my long cross country trips, I got to go land over there, and I don't know, it just brought back good memories mostly. But from Powderly, Texas, uh, Dad took us up to North Dakota. We were almost in Canada. Of course, you're in Western Canada. This was like where the Peace Gardens are, right where North Dakota, the border is. And we were just a short distance south of the Canadian border there in a little place called Willow City, North Dakota. It's between Minot and Rugby, North Dakota. We spent a year and a half there. As kids in the back of the station wagon going up there, I remember praying, "Oh, dear God, please let the parsonage be two-story and let me have a bedroom upstairs." That's a kid's dream. And guess what? Exactly, that's how I had it. I had this huge bedroom upstairs in this old Victorian house that's probably a couple hundred years old. The people from the church, they were in there with ladders, repainting the whole thing. I mean, they had it all. Revamped it for us. The new pastor's coming, and when we got there, man, we lived in. We had it's like a new house, and I had an upstairs bedroom. And that year, that was about 1966 or seven, along in there. They had the snow of the century. They had, I remember the snow around our house. You could see the grass for, I don't know, about 18 inches or 2 feet. But the snow in our yard was piled up about, I want to say, I don't want to exaggerate. I'm going to say at least 4 feet deep, but I want to say it might have been as much as 6 feet deep. It just kept snowing that year. They said that was, I even saw a news feed recently on the internet that said they hadn't had that snow. I think it's actually in 50 years they hadn't up to that point they hadn't had that much snow. And man, as a kid, that was just to me that was just right up my alley. I mean, I love the snow, and I got too cold out there a time or two, and my toes I almost got frostbite. But that was the greatest year of my life as far as a child, and it wouldn't have happened if my dad hadn't have been a pastor. But we could he couldn't find mechanical work up there. He ended up carrying shingles up a roof on a ladder. I mean, up a ladder onto a roof. And of course, my dad, he was not afraid of hard work, and he had a family to feed. Me and my sister and my mom. There's just four of us. I'm the only one left living now. I'm 60. Okay, I'm 66 years old. My wife's 67. She's 8 months ahead of me. Your province is above Montana. Okay, yeah, you're a little bit west. Man, do you hunt over there? Do you get to hunt? My dad used to pay to hunt in Colorado. He'd get an elk tag, and they charged him, I don't know, $300 or something. You do get to hunt. That's awesome. That's the one thing I think would be great is to get to. Well, I don't know if I could handle the cold now, but Canada. After watching Steve Isdall's videos and him showing all the beautiful, all the outdoors and all the different animals, and it appears to me from what he's saying, if you live up there, you don't. I mean, down here we have to get a place to hunt. We might have to pay for a lease, which I've done that before. Just hunting the white-tailed deer that we have down here. But you guys got some big, huge animals. I mean, the moose, the elk, the black-tailed deer, then the white-tailed deer. I mean, it just seems like he. I don't know how many freezers that Steve Isdall has, but I have an idea. He's got several, and then he's feeding those kids locally. He's feeding the kids down where he lives. And from the way I'm not sure, but the way I understand it, I wonder if he's not feeding them a lot of elk meat. But my dad brought an elk home one year, and I tell you what, that was great tasting. I mean, it was great. He kind of got ruined on it because he had a bad experience. He had a 300 Magnum that he shot the elk with, and I'm not sure, but I think he said he made a long shot like 400 yards, and he ended up having a hard time getting it to give up, and he said it just kind of did something to him. It wasn't just a one shot kill, and so it kind of ruined it for him. But he had waited for a trophy elk, and this was a very big elk. And anyway, that was my experience as far as what my dad got to do. He got to go up in Colorado and bring home an elk, which to me, being up in Canada would be awesome. You know, some people would eat bear. They had too many parasites. Yeah, I've often thought about that too. I thought I don't know if I'd want to eat bear, and I didn't know why. It's just that I don't feel good about eating bear. There's some that's kind of some people have no problem like eating alligator around here. I don't. I just don't want to eat no alligator. It's funny too. You know they say parasites. That's behind a lot of things that apparently cause sicknesses to people. It's parasites. So yeah, I wouldn't want to probably eat bear either. I can't even envision wanting to kill a bear unless he was trying to get me or something. Now, I might would then, but I sure wouldn't want to go after one just to for a hunting experience. I'd rather hunt a deer or an elk. Sometimes even thinking about killing a moose is scary because those things are huge. Man, what if he got mad at you and came after you and got you before you were able to get him? I mean, I don't know. I'm not really that big of a hunter. I do enjoy being in the woods, mostly in camping. My father-in-law, before he died, and my dad used to take me. We'd go in the woods and hunt. I loved it. I just love being in the woods, just for the being out there, mostly cooking out under an open sky. Um, yeah. But anyway, back to the story, and I'm almost through. I'm not gonna make this too long. We moved from North Dakota. It got so cold up there that we just kind of had our feel of it. And my dad couldn't get a mechanic's job, so he was having to take what he could get. And when it got really cold, he couldn't haul shingles up the ladder anymore. So uh, it would just making a living was very scarce. So there was a point where he prayed about it and he felt compelled to go back south. And we had considered going back to Arizona, or my dad had. We were kids. I was probably about 10 or 12 years old at that point. And we got to ride snowmobiles too. Some of the people in the church, they had cattle out there and they had snowmobiles, and we got to ride those too. But this lady sent a letter at that from that church that he had started in Palestine, Texas, and she said, "Oh," she said, "Brother Davis," she says, "they're talking about closing the church again. Would you please come back?" Oh man, I tell you what, I wish my dad had. When I was a kid, I wish my dad had not got that letter because we didn't want to go back there. We wanted to go back where he had money because I wanted to get a mini bike. Now, when you're a kid, that's kind of like all you think about is what's in it for me. And so, but anyway, this lady, she got to him, man. He's like, "Oh, I got to go back down there." Um, so he did. He got that church going again, and it's been going ever since. And my dad, I lost him 27 years ago now, but that church is still going. And then we're back here in Texas, and have been ever since 1970. It was January 1970 when we landed back here in Texas. The clean food list in Leviticus. I was reading that recently. Honestly, I really was. I started in the Old Testament, started reading at least the first 5 books of Moses there, and I did run across. And you know what? I think probably just even logically, like not eating. Well, like don't eat a catfish. What is a catfish? A bottom dweller. He eats all the garbage. Probably no telling how many parasites. I've read that list and talks about don't eat anything that doesn't have scales and yeah, even though we're not under it, true. There's still probably some very good reasoning. Well, just yeah, I'm sure there was a reason behind that. Why not to eat that stuff? And I'm like you said, I'm not going to say I haven't eaten. I like shrimp, but you know, I'm just about to get burned off of shrimp too because I'm not sure it's a good idea. As I'm getting older, I'm starting to feel, you know, like my body feels healthier when I eat healthier foods, and it's more fun feeling good than it is to feel what some of these foods make you feel like. But yeah, I don't think we're under the yeah, right. We're on the same page there. But anyway, I recently took something that's been circulating that kills parasites, and I don't know that I'd want to say the name of it because it's controversial, but they use it for like animals, you know, to deworm animals and such. And so I took a human's version of it, and you know, honestly, I felt better. So I think it's done that. I think it's killed some parasites, and yeah, I'd recommend it if you well, I can't recommend it because I'm not a doctor, but I'll just put it this way. I took a portion of it that's supposed to be for humans to take, and I took it according to how they say to take it, and I feel better. So it's kind of like I take, there's this place that I like to go to called the Drug Emporium. They have vitamins and, you know, there's certain things I've heard about on the internet. Yeah, you do. I figured you did. There's things that I run across on the internet that say, "Oh, this is good for this, and take this, and it's natural stuff." I don't like to take. I'm not saying I never would take anything synthetic, but I prefer natural things because they don't harm you. They don't have side effects. At least that's been my experience. And so I'll take things like I take a multivitamin, multi mineral. My friend was on my case about that the other day. Oh, you got to trust God. I said, I do trust God. I said, but you know, they tell me that there's a lot of minerals that our soil is depleted in now. We're not getting them. What's wrong if you feed your body with minerals that are supposed to help your body, you know, more quickly take care of healing itself? You know, if you, I said, you know, you accidentally get your a cut on you, it heals up. I mean, but sometimes it heals faster if you maybe put something on it to help keep the germs out of it. And anyway, so I don't feel at all condemned about taking things like that as long as they're natural things. But um, and if it's good enough for an animal, it's funny to me. I've always said this: you take a an animal like your horse, he can't talk. You take him to the veterinarian, and the veterinarian, he can't communicate with the horse, but he knows what to do for him. Man alive, I mean, those guys got to be good. Maybe I ought to go to the veterinarian if I ever need one. Zoos are the biggest consumers. Yeah. It's funny, how they get money invested in an animal like an expensive horse. For instance, I got the other grandmother to my grandchildren, she owns horses. She knows all about all that stuff, and she even has some of this stuff that we're talking about. And so you get an investment in a fine animal, especially a racehorse. Man, they give them stuff. Maybe we ought to be taking that stuff. I mean, of course, you wouldn't take as much of it because you're not as big as a horse. But anyway, I gotten on side trails like I always do. But I've enjoyed talking with you, and especially somebody from Canada. My dad used to love to go to Alaska, and they would go through, I think he said Yellowknife. I forget. They had to go, of course, you had to go through Canada to get there, but they went up there a couple of different times that I know of for sure. And he seemed like he took off one time as much as 6 months. That's the year he went to Colorado. He's gone for multiples of weeks up to Alaska in a motorhome and stayed up there. And one time was in a van, and the roads have gotten a lot better since when he went there, but. Uh, they used to love to go way up there, way up north, and I never did. I never got to go there. Maybe I will get to someday though. Kentucky to see Noah's. Yeah, I've heard about that. That's pretty neat. I wouldn't mind seeing that myself. I'm not sure. I think I saw when I was in Branson, Missouri, they had something like that over there too. Probably wasn't as big as the one in Kentucky, but talking about the Noah's Ark. If anybody's not seeing what I'm seeing here on the chat, Kentucky. Yep. I'd like to just go and travel and just take my time and just go to Mount Rushmore and see the presidents. I don't know if you said the wrong state. Honestly, you wouldn't know it by me because I haven't been to it. But I think you're right, though. I think it probably is in Kentucky. Somebody was just talking about it recently in town. I heard them. They said they had went and saw it, and it was couldn't quit talking about it. It'd be pretty neat. But I'm sure you get online and find out where it is real quick. Wouldn't be any problem. But I don't mean to just ramble. We ended up coming back to Texas. My dad, he continued to preach up until the day. Well, the last words out of his mouth were "Sweet Jesus." I remember that. I tried to revive him and couldn't. He had a heart attack, and that was the saddest day of my life, I guess. The day I lost my dad. But my mom called me, and I came over there. I'm so glad I stayed around though, because he got a second wind and thought he was going to be okay. And my wife, I said, "You can go on home. I'm going to stay here a little while." And I'm sure glad I did. My dad ended up dying that night, 27 years ago. My best friend, my dad, we worked together. We hunted together. I lost about 3 or 4 people all in one there. But I had the best example of somebody to follow as far as becoming a believer. Uh, I saw him. You lost your dad you were 6 in 1977. You're younger than I am then. Yeah. Wow. 6 years old. That must have been tough. Well, it's tough anyway. It was tough for me. And I was 30? I was 38 or 9, I think. 38 or 39 years old. That was in 1997. Yeah, that was tough. The Lord sent me about 4 or 5 men in my life during that time in my life to get me through that. As far as one individual was a man that called about buying the plane. Uh, my mom put the airplane up in this big yellow paper we get at the airport, and a guy from, I believe it was Oklahoma, a Baptist minister, contacted. She had him call me because I flew the plane, and my dad and I flew the plane together mostly. And she said, my son can tell you all the answers you need to the questions about the plane. Well, God had actually used that Baptist minister to really minister to me when I lost my dad. And I tell you what, it just it's amazing how God comes in and fills in gaps for us when we get in hard places. Another man who owns a body shop here out at the edge of town, uh, he ministered to me. I had this guy that I call my best friend. He's like my brother, and I've got several of those actually. But this one guy that we really think alike, God brought him into my life and ministered to me, and God got me through that. It took a year of being without my dad. The first 6 months was the absolute hardest. You probably can identify when you lost your dad. Of course, even being 6 years old, I, I think I was about 8 years old when my little dog, my little beagle, got ran over because uh, was he was smelling my path when I went across the highway to get some worms to go fishing at a pond that was nearby, and I guess my mom probably shouldn't have told me that. She said, you know what your dog was doing? He was tracking you." And man, I tell you what, at 8 years old, that just about killed me to the point I wouldn't even get close to an animal after that. It hurts so bad. And that's about the closest I could come to explaining when I lost my dad. Was it when I went back to the time when I lost that dog, my first dog I was really close to, and got ran over, and I felt like I was responsible because he was trying to follow me, and so I don't know how I got onto that, but anyway, what I was telling though is God sent people into my life that helped me through that because I had to keep working. We weren't expecting Dad to die. I mean, it just kind of happened out of the blue, and so it took about a year before I was able to adjust to accept it. Not that not that I was okay with it. I'm still not okay with it. I really actually I had to really repent for what I said to God when my dad died, and I wasn't able to bring him back. During that time, I was just saying, God, I don't care what your will. I just want my dad back. I was going to try to work that out with God later, but I was so desperate when I saw my dad was dying. I told God, I was praying so hard. I said, I know we're supposed to want you. Of course, I don't think it was God's will that my dad die. But later I told the Lord, I said, Lord, I was just being honest and I'm sorry, and I apologize. But it was the toughest thing that I had ever gone through up to that point in my life. Other than that, that dog was, people and dogs. I tell you what, you can get really close to an animal. And so I decided not to anymore. I keep a distance because my heart just it about tore it out of me when I lost that little animal. And then I lost my dad. And I don't know, maybe in a way, in a good way, maybe it's good that that did happen to me when I was young because maybe it helped me prepare me for when my dad went. But anyway, my dad was a great guy. He got me started on a good path as far as uh, living for the Lord, seeing a good example. There's so many people that are a good example when everybody's watching. But see, like the kids know better. Well, guess what? I saw my dad, I mean, all the time. And he was real through and through. He wasn't hiding anything. My dad he was the same. If you woke him up in the middle of the night, he was the same as he was during the day when everybody was around. And I'm so thankful for that because a lot of people don't have that testimony. He said repentance is a good thing to do. My dad knew days before he was going to die. He died in a house. Oh wow. I've heard that sometimes people do know ahead of time. I don't know how that works, but there are things that you can know. I call it a knowing, and God gave me a knowing about who my wife was going to be, and I couldn't explain that to anybody. It seemed like I was going crazy, but I tell you what, it was the absolute truth the whole time. God knew who He'd chosen to be my wife, and there's a lot to that knowing. I've heard that before. Someone knowing they were going to die, but it was in a house fire. Man, hey, hello, Rob. I've been on here rambling now for almost 40 minutes. I just wanted to, a mouth starting to get dry. I just wanted to get in here before we've got this, I guess, an ice. I hope it's not an ice storm. It's supposed to get in the mid 20s tonight. And for the next 4 or 5 nights, we're used to humidity and heat. What's sad is a lot of times when it gets that cold, we lose electricity. If we lose electricity, then I can't have a live feed. I can't upload a video. I can't do much of any. I can still read this. If the electricity goes out, I can still read this, which is what I'll be doing. It's not always a bad thing to electric to go out. I guess we do have a generator, but yeah, I guess I probably should wrap this up. I just kind of wanted to give my backstory, in which I did, and about how my dad got started off into spiritual life, and yeah, I guess I ought to wind it down. Thanks for coming on here, guys, and I really do appreciate the conversation back and forth. I'm getting accustomed to how this live thing works, and what I'd like to do at some point, maybe a question and answer thing. I don't know. I may not be ready for that, but um, and some of you guys can help me too, because like it sounded to me like I'm going to step out here and say Tignim username. That sounds like you've read the word too a lot. Hey, you the same. Have a blessed day. God bless y'all. I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and thank you and goodbye.